The housing bubble's over, and now we're about to witness the biggest real estate crash in our lifetime, which could take house prices all the way back down to pre-pandemic levels. I'm Biko Konstantinos, and it's a pleasure to have you. The countries that were ranked the most bubbliest regarding house prices are starting to see house price declines accelerate. And this is a strong notice for the rest of the globe's housing markets that the bubble's over and we could be on the cusp of the biggest crash we've ever seen. This economic report ranks the countries where house prices have risen the most relative to their fundamentals. In other words, they've had the biggest housing bubbles. Top 5, we have New Zealand, Czech Republic, Hungary, Australia, and Canada. And as we're going to see, New Zealand and Australia are seeing accelerating price declines, and most likely Canada will be next. For more information on this economic report regarding the bubbliest markets, check out this video here. And while you're at it, please give this video a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel because my goal is to provide you with valuable and entertaining content. This Guardian report shows that New Zealand house prices have seen the fastest drop since the global financial crisis. New Zealand's a great example because they've been plagued by runaway housing markets for years, with Wellington and Auckland classed as some of the most least affordable property markets in the world. And as a result, home ownership rates have been falling as the average house price has risen above $1 million. Nationally in New Zealand, prices have fallen by 7.8%, with Auckland and Wellington falling 11.7% and 13.5% respectively. These are massive falls, but you gotta remember New Zealand rose possibly the most out of nearly every other country. House prices rose over 31% in the first year after the pandemic, up until July 2021. But how much of those ridiculous rises were caused by crazy speculation? Because that's gonna have a major effect as to how far prices will actually fall. As we know now, prices were significantly overinflated by government intervention, which involved handouts, massively stimulating the economy and reducing interest rates all the way to near zero. That put a rocket under house prices in New Zealand, but now the opposite is happening and the rest of the world better take notice. Australian house prices are also falling at the fastest rate since the 2008 financial crisis. Although the housing market's only been falling for 3 months, the declines comparable with the onset of the global financial crisis and also the sharp downswing of the early 1980s. Overall in Australia, prices rose 28.6% from mid-2020 to April 2022, which saw the peak. Although the real crazy speculation occurred in 2021, and there's been a massive shift in 2022. Sydney, Australia's most expensive city, is seeing the sharpest value falls in almost 40 years. Tim Lawless from CoreLogic said that the downturn is accelerating and that he wouldn't be surprised if the current decline gets worse than what we saw in the global financial crisis. Even Canada is seeing the fastest price slide since 2005. The benchmark price of a home fell 1.9% in June, which marks the 3rd straight month of falling prices and the biggest monthly drop since 2005. So we have a domino effect going on. The housing markets that rose the most and saw the biggest housing bubbles are also starting to crash first, with house price declines accelerating. First, we saw New Zealand house prices fall off a cliff, and now we're starting to see the same thing happen in Australia and Canada, and soon I think we're going to start seeing that happen in the United States. So this isn't normal everyday housing market type stuff. This is a phenomenon that was caused by all central banks following the same ultra-loose monetary policy, which put a rocket under housing prices. And now central banks have pivoted and they're all following the same interest rate hike mantra. So they've gone from ridiculously cheap and easy money to now slowly starting to tighten, but we really haven't seen real action to try and tame inflation as yet. If that were to occur, watch out housing markets. So let's look at what could really cause a crash in housing markets and how low prices could end up. It's very clear that we're going to see house price declines nearly across every housing market. So some of that housing boom we saw over the last 2 years is going to be given up as prices fall. However, will they just drop a little bit before the boom sort of starts back up? Or are we going to see a more severe downturn which could see prices fall all the way back to pre-pandemic levels? According to the Australian Financial Review, the risk of house prices crashing in the next 12 months has increased dramatically, and that's because of interest rates. It's been decades since we've seen interest rates rise this high, this fast, and that's going to be a critical factor which will determine where house prices end up. The interest rate hike cycle has definitely not ended, and we're going to see more and more interest rates over coming months. The big question will be, will central banks be able to stop soon and give the market a break? The trouble is, nearly every country's gone on a massive spending spree, and their national debt levels have risen to quite ridiculous levels. We've even seen recently some nations grappling with national debt defaults like Sri Lanka, and it's causing a major economic crisis. Having large amounts of debt both nationally and personally in a soaring interest rate environment can be a recipe for disaster. So central banks know they can't go too high with interest rates, because then we're going to see economic Armageddon. But if they don't go high enough, high levels of inflation could persist, which would create very high cost of living pressures on wide sections of the community. And like we've seen in countries like Turkey, soaring inflation can also cripple economies. So you can go too hard with interest rates and cripple an economy, or you can not go hard enough and also cripple economy that way too. And this is why many countries, especially the bubbliest ones, are at a major risk of a housing crash. Now, there's also the possibility that we have a grind lower with the housing markets over the next few years. And this could easily come about by having a stagflationary environment where we have low GDP growth mixed with high inflation. In that case, unemployment would start rising, costs of living would remain high, and inflation could also remain elevated. With central banks no longer able to reduce interest rates sharply, the economy could grind lower, and with it, the housing market as well. So right now, we've seen all the speculative froth come out of the housing markets, and that could easily wipe 5% or even more of house prices. Next, we're starting to see borrowers or home buyers not able to buy as much because interest rates have risen so much higher than they were last year. So many buyers just can't afford to pay what sellers are wanting or asking. And because of that, prices will continue falling. Another factor is that investors might slow down buying new houses because with higher inflation, the returns just aren't there. And on top of that, there's a lot of uncertainty and growing fear in the markets, which could keep many investors out. So that will see house price declines, but for us to really see a crash, there could be a few scenarios. For example, interest rates just keep going up a lot higher than anyone expected. So if inflation is stubbornly high, that has the potential to destroy the housing market. But this would be the last resort for central banks. And the other major scenario I could see would be a severe and longer lasting recession across many countries. That would greatly raise unemployment levels, and if it was combined with higher interest rates and massive debt, house prices would get destroyed. But that's just my opinion. What do you think's going to happen to the housing market over the next 12 or 24 months? Do you think it's going to be disastrous, or do you think there's no need to worry? House prices will go up like they always have. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I'll catch you in my next video.